city had drained us. Endless noise, long work hours, and the constant buzz of responsibility. A break was overdue. So, after weeks of planning, the four of us, Ryan, Noah, Daniel, and me, Alex, set our sights on a secluded stretch of wilderness near the Willamette River. No official campsites, no marked trails, no other campers. Just us, some fishing gear, a cooler packed with beer, and the promise of a stress-free weekend. At least, that's what we thought. We wanted solitude, a chance to disconnect from the world and immerse ourselves in nature's quiet embrace. Looking back, maybe choosing such a remote spot was our first mistake. The hike in was long and exhausting, but we were in good spirits. We set up our tents near a clearing by the river, gathered firewood, and spent the day fishing. The sun was hot, the beer was cold, and for a while, everything was perfect. As night fell, we built a roaring bonfire, cooking whatever fish we had managed to catch, and sharing dumb stories from our college days. By midnight, we were all feeling the alcohol. The fire crackled, and the sounds of the forest surrounded us. Owls hooting, leaves rustling in the breeze, the gentle rush of the river nearby. It was peaceful, almost eerily so. At some point, we all turned in for the night. I shared a tent with Ryan, while Noah and Daniel took the other. I was half asleep when I first heard it. Laughter. It was distant at first, barely more than a whisper carried by the wind. I assumed it was Noah and Daniel still talking. But as the seconds passed, something about it felt off. It wasn't the laughter of two people. It was just one person, a slow, deliberate chuckle, the kind of laugh someone makes when they're watching something amusing, something only they understand. I nudged Ryan. "You hear that?" he grumbled, rolling over. "It's just Noah and Daniel, ignore it." But as I lay there, I realized something chilling. The laughter wasn't coming from their tent. It was coming from the woods. A sudden rustling noise made my blood turn cold. It was close. Too close. I held my breath, straining to listen. The laughter had stopped, but the silence that followed was even worse. Then, from the other tent, Daniel's voice broke through the stillness. "Guys, that's not us." Ryan shot up, instantly alert. "What?" Noah's voice followed, shaky. "We thought it was you." Something moved just outside our tent. A shadow passed over the fabric, and then a hand. It pressed against the thin material, just inches from where I sat. Pale, skeletal, fingers too long, too thin. For a moment, time stopped. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. I just stared at the hand, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. And then, a single, sharp scrape, fingernails dragging down the tent fabric, slow and deliberate. Ryan grabbed my arm, his grip tight with fear. "We need to go, now." Panic took over. We burst out of the tent, our hearts pounding in our chests. Noah and Daniel were already outside, their faces pale with terror. "Run!" Daniel shouted. We didn't hesitate. We bolted through the trees, branches whipping against our faces, the ground uneven beneath our feet. I didn't dare look back. I didn't want to know what was behind us. I just ran, lungs burning, adrenaline drowning out every other sensation. Somehow, miraculously, we made it back to the car. I fumbled with the keys, hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped them. The second the engine roared to life, I slammed my foot on the gas, peeling out of there so fast that gravel sprayed behind us. No one spoke. No one dared to break the silence. It wasn't until we were miles away, deep into the safety of civilization, that anyone finally said anything. "What the hell was that?" Noah whispered, his voice barely audible over the suffocating silence that followed. None of us had an answer. We stood there, breathless, our bodies frozen in place, waiting for something, anything, to move. But the woods had gone completely still. No crickets, no rustling leaves, no wind. Just the unbearable weight of silence pressing down on us. We didn't stop driving until the sun started creeping over the horizon. Only then did I finally pull over, my nerves frayed, my body trembling. The four of us sat in silence, the weight of what had happened, settling over us like a thick fog. I've gone over that night 1,000 times, trying to rationalize what we saw, what we heard, but I can't. The laughter, the hand, the way the entire forest seemed to hold its breath as if something unnatural was watching us. It wasn't human. It couldn't have been. It's been months, and I still wake up in the middle of the night, hearing that eerie, distorted laughter echoing in my ears. The memory of that pale hand pressing against the tent still sends a chill down my spine. I haven't set foot in the woods since, and I never will again. As we reached the clearing, The last streaks of daylight faded into the horizon, leaving behind a sky awash in deep amber and violet hues. Towering trees loomed around us, their dark silhouettes standing like silent sentinels, enclosing the small patch of earth in an almost oppressive stillness. The crisp scent of pine and damp soil filled the air. There was something undeniably peaceful about the clearing, a serene beauty that made it feel almost sacred, yet an unshakable unease lingered just beneath the surface, like a forgotten melody playing on the edge of memory. The trees seemed to lean inward, their gnarled branches stretching overhead like skeletal fingers, forming a natural barrier between us and the outside world. We moved quickly, eager to set up camp before the night claimed the sky. The process felt oddly ceremonial, each action deliberate, as if we were marking the end of something more than just another day. Maybe it was the finality of this trip, our last together before we all went our separate ways, that cast an invisible weight over us. Natalie, ever the pragmatic one, took the lead in pitching the tents, barking instructions with the sharp precision of a general. Ben, the eternal comedian, fumbled with the poles, his exaggerated clumsiness earning a steady stream of amused insults from her. In contrast, Alex moved with quiet efficiency, securing ropes and smoothing out the ground sheet with practiced ease. Amid the rustling of gear and clinking of utensils, Caleb, our self-proclaimed leader, volunteered to gather firewood. "I'll be back before you have time to start a ghost story," he quipped, flashing a lopsided grin as he hoisted a hatchet over his shoulder. His humor, always tinged with a cocky confidence, managed to pull a few chuckles from us, but there was something in his tone, something fleeting and almost imperceptible, that hinted at unease. For a moment, he lingered at the edge of the clearing, his gaze sweeping the dense trees before he disappeared into the thickening shadows. Minutes passed as we busied ourselves, the dusk deepening into a cool indigo. Stars blinked through the canopy above, tiny pinpricks of light against an ocean of darkness. That was when it started. At first, it was subtle, a faint glimmer of crimson on the horizon. It was easy enough to dismiss, a plane, a satellite, or even the remnants of the sunset. "Maybe it's aliens," Ben joked, his voice dripping with playful sarcasm. A few chuckles followed, but the laughter felt forced, hollow. The light felt wrong somehow. The flickers grew brighter, more frequent, the eerie red glow bleeding through the treetops like liquid fire. The familiar sounds of the forest, chirping insects, rustling leaves, seemed to dim, replaced by a low hum, a vibration that settled in our bones. By the time Caleb returned, his arms laden with wood, the atmosphere had thickened with tension. "What's with the fireworks?" he asked, his tone laced with uneasy curiosity. He dropped the wood with a dull thud, tilting his head toward the sky. No one answered immediately. The words felt too small, too insufficient against the strangeness unfolding before us. But before anyone could speak, something impossible happened. The fire pit, which we had carefully constructed but left untouched, suddenly erupted into flames. Roaring heat burst forth without warning, licking at the air with violent intensity. The sharp crackle of burning wood snapped us out of our stupor, our heads turning in unison, frozen in disbelief. "What the hell?" Natalie whispered, her voice barely audible over the roaring flames. Alex took a cautious step forward, his wide eyes reflecting the frantic dance of fire. "Did anyone?" "No one lit it," Ben cut in, his voice strained. The fire burned fiercely, casting jagged shadows against the tents and trees. The heat pressed against us, suffocating, yet none of us moved to extinguish it. We were too shocked, too unsettled by the sheer impossibility of it all. Then we saw them. 6 figures emerged from the darkness at the edge of the clearing, just beyond the reach of the fire's glow. At first, we thought they were shadows, distortions cast by the flames. But these figures were different, solid, deliberate in their stillness, disturbingly human in shape yet utterly alien in presence. They didn't move, they didn't speak, they simply stood there, their forms merging unnaturally with the blackness of the forest. The air thickened, pressing in around us like an unseen force. Then the silence shattered. Alex let out a strangled gasp, stumbling backward. "We have to go," he choked out, his voice unsteady, laced with fear. We didn't hesitate. Panic took hold and we ran, crashing through the forest, abandoning everything in our path. Not once did we dare to look back. And we never went back. I was 15 when it happened, during a weekend camping trip with a group of friends and our outdoor instructors. My best friend Daniel was supposed to come along, but a last-minute family emergency forced him to cancel. That left me to set up camp alone. Frustrated but determined, I tried to make the best of it. The sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and deep purple as we returned from a long day of hiking. The exhaustion of the trek clung to my muscles, but there was still work to do. We had to set up our tents before settling in for the night. Most of the others had gotten theirs up quickly, but I had fallen behind. Without Daniel's help, I fumbled with the stakes and poles, struggling to get everything secured in the fading light. The more frustrated I became, the harder it was to focus. Liam, one of the older boys in the group, must have noticed me struggling. Without a word, he stepped in to help, holding the tent fabric taut while I hammered in the stakes. Between the two of us, we finally got the tent standing. I muttered a tired thanks, and we both went to grab some dinner before joining the others around the fire. The night was filled with laughter and eerie storytelling. Everyone took turns sharing their most terrifying tales, the flickering fire casting shifting shadows against the trees. Someone spoke about an old hermit who lived in these very woods, watching campers from the darkness. Another told a story of a man who vanished without a trace during a trip like this. It was all meant to spook us, to add a bit of thrill to the night. I had always enjoyed these sessions, but something about the stories made my skin crawl this time. Maybe it was because I was alone in my tent, without Daniel's reassuring presence beside me. When we finally retired for the night, I was almost relieved to have my own space. The air inside the tent was cool, the distant hoot of an owl echoing through the trees. I slipped into my sleeping bag, my body heavy with exhaustion, and quickly drifted into a deep sleep. I woke to the sound of heavy footsteps crunching leaves outside my tent. My heart pounded as they circled, slow and deliberate. Our tents were spaced apart. No one should be this close. "Who's there?" I called out. The steps halted. Silence stretched before they moved away toward the woods. I gripped the zipper, torn between looking and staying hidden. Unease crept in, keeping me awake for hours, listening. Then, just as I had started to relax, the footsteps returned. This time they were closer. The slow, deliberate pacing circled my tent again, heavier than before. My stomach twisted into knots. My irritation flared, and before I could think twice, I sat up and unzipped the tent door, ready to confront whoever was messing with me. But when I peered outside, my blood ran cold. Standing just a few feet away was a tall man, far taller than anyone in our group. He looked to be in his mid-30 seconds, his face illuminated by the weak glow of the moon. He had a strange, unsettling smile, his eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My body screamed at me to do something, but I was paralyzed. Then, slowly, the man lifted a single finger to his lips in a shushing motion. Something inside me snapped. I bolted from the tent, adrenaline surging through me as I sprinted toward the instructor's tents. My throat burned as I screamed for help, my voice breaking in sheer terror. I could hear the rush of footsteps behind me, but I didn't dare look back. Before I could even reach the tents, one of the instructors, Mr. Carter, was already outside, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. He caught sight of my panic-stricken face and rushed toward me. "What happened?" he demanded. I could barely get the words out as I pointed toward my tent, my whole body trembling. "There's a man, someone's out there." Mr. Carter wasted no time. He grabbed his rifle and called for the other instructor, Mr. Hayes. Within seconds, they were armed and making their way toward my tent, scanning the shadows for any sign of the intruder. But when they searched the area, the man was nowhere to be found. The only thing left behind were deep footprints circling my tent, prints that didn't match any of ours. A cold dread settled over the camp. Mr. Carter didn't hesitate. He ordered us to move our tents closer together for safety. None of us slept. Every rustling leaf, every distant snap of a branch sent my heart pounding. At first light, the instructors made the call. We were leaving. No one argued. I never went camping again. That man's unsettling smile still lingers in my mind. But the worst part? I can't stop wondering what would have happened if I hadn't run.